Yosemite stretches across 750,000 acres of granite cliffs, ancient sequoias, and valleys carved by glaciers that vanished 10,000 years ago. 4 million people visit every year ago. They see Half Dome, they photograph waterfalls, they hike the marked trails. But there are places in Yosemite where the trails end without explanation, where signs appear overnight warning of closures that never get announced, where rangers refuse to patrol past certain coordinates. Lock your doors, put your headphones on. After this video, you'll never see Yosemite the same way again. These aren't wilderness preservation zones. These aren't habitats for endangered species. These are areas where something went wrong, where evidence was documented and then suppressed, where people who ventured too far came back different, if they came back at all. Officials blame safety concerns, environmental protection, unstable terrain. But the rangers who've worked there long enough know better, because in Yosemite, some places don't want visitors, and some things that live there have learned to wait. The Merced Grove looks peaceful in the photographs. A sequoia forest on the northwestern edge of the park, accessible only by an unmaintained fire road that park maps label as seasonal access only. For decades, it was one of Yosemite's quieter groves, visited by a few dozen hikers per week, who wanted solitude away from the crowded main attractions. In the spring of 2012, that changed to TVs. A group of hikers reported hearing rhythmic tapping sounds coming from deep within the grove. Not woodpeckers, one woman said, too slow, too deliberate. It sounded like someone knocking on wood in patterns. When they followed the sound, the tapping stopped. When they returned to the trail, it started again from a different direction. Park rangers investigated and found something disturbing carved into the bark of several sequoias. Symbols that matched no known indigenous markings. Circles within circles, spirals that seemed to rotate if you stared too long. One ranger photographed them for documentation. When he tried to upload the images to the park database, every file corrupted. Then the disappearances started. A solo backpacker entered the grove on a Tuesday morning in July 2013. He checked in at the ranger station, showed his permit, said he'd be back by Friday. Friday came, he never returned. Search teams combed the grove for 2 weeks. They found his tent, his gear, his boots lined up neatly outside the tent entrance. His phone was inside, fully charged, with 47 minutes of video recorded the night he vanished. The video showed darkness, the beam of his flashlight sweeping across tree trunks. Then it captured something no one could explain, a voice calling his name from somewhere beyond the tent. His own voice. Clear, exact, impossible. The recording ended with him saying, "That's not me." 3 more people went missing in the Merced Grove over the next 18 months. 2 were found days later, disoriented, unable to explain where they'd been. They described the same thing, walking in circles for hours while the sun stayed in the same position. Trees that moved when they weren't looking, the sensation that the forest was breathing around them. The 3rd person was never found. In early 2015, the National Park Service quietly restricted access to the Merced Grove. No official announcement, no public explanation. The fire road was barricaded with chain-link fencing. Signs posted, "Area closed for restoration." When local journalists requested details, the Park Service cited ongoing environmental studies. No studies were ever published. No timeline for reopening was provided. And to this day, rangers assigned to the Northwest District refuse to enter the grove after dark. Some say if you stand at the boundary fence at dusk, you can still hear the tapping. Slow, deliberate, waiting. What the Park Service calls restoration, others call containment. Because when you seal off a place without explanation, it's worth asking, what are they restoring? Or what are they keeping inside? Deep in Yosemite's high country, past the well-traveled trails and maintained campsites, lies an area known only as Site 17. It doesn't appear on any public map. GPS coordinates redirect to nearby Glen Olin. Hikers who've stumbled across it describe a meadow surrounded by sheer granite walls, roughly 200 meters in diameter, with a single stream running through the center. It shouldn't feel wrong, but everyone who's been there says the same thing. It does. In the summer of 2008, a geology research team from Stanford obtained a permit to study glacial erosion patterns in the backcountry. They followed ridgelines north of Tuolumne Meadows, taking core samples, documenting striations left by ancient ice. On the fourth day, they descended into a valley their maps didn't show. A meadow that shouldn't exist. Dr. Lauren Vasquez, the lead geologist, noted immediate anomalies. The rock faces around the meadow were smooth, too smooth for natural weathering. The stream in the center ran cold, far colder than it should at that elevation in July. Her compass spun erratically. Electronic equipment drained in minutes. One team member's watch stopped entirely and never restarted. Then they noticed the silence. No birds, no insects, no wind rustling the grass. The meadow felt like a photograph, perfectly still, unnaturally preserved. Dr. Vasquez described it later as a place where sound goes to die. They took samples, they photographed the area. They documented GPS coordinates, 37.8771, N119.3425W. Then they hiked back to their base camp and reported the discovery to the Park Service. Within 48 hours, their research permit was revoked. Their samples were confiscated. The Park Service told them the area was classified as sensitive wilderness and prohibited all future access. Dr. Vasquez filed a Freedom of Information request to understand why. 6 months later, she received a single-page response with most of the text redacted. Only one phrase remained visible. Acoustic anomaly confirmed. Monitoring equipment installed. But here's the thing. If it's just a geological anomaly, why classify it? Why revoke academic permits? Why confiscate samples that should only show rock composition and water chemistry? In 2011, a wildfire swept through the backcountry near Site 17. Firefighters established containment lines, conducted aerial surveys, monitored the burn's progression. The fire came within 400 meters of the meadow, then stopped. Not because of wind shifts. Not because of natural fire breaks. It just stopped, as if it reached a boundary it couldn't cross. One firefighter described it in an off-the-record interview. We watched the flames get close to that valley, and they just turned, like something pushed them back. Since then, the Park Service has erected barriers at every known access point to the area. No signs, no explanations, just steel posts and chain-link fencing that appears on no official infrastructure maps. Rangers who've been stationed in the high country for years say the same thing when asked about Site 17. They're not allowed to talk about it. And yet, hikers still report finding it. Not intentionally. They get lost, they take a wrong turn, they follow a stream that shouldn't be there. And when they enter the meadow, their devices fail, their sense of time distorts, and the silence presses against their ears like physical weight. Some say if you stay too long, you start hearing things that aren't there, or things that shouldn't be there, a low hum beneath the silence, a voice that sounds like your own, calling from the center of the stream, and the overwhelming feeling that the meadow is watching you, waiting for you to step closer, just a little closer. No one who's found Site 17 by accident has ever gone back on purpose. And the Park Service has made very sure that no one ever will. Tenaya Canyon cuts through Yosemite like a wound that never healed. A steep, rugged gorge between Half Dome and Cloud's Rest. It's one of the few areas in the park that remains almost entirely trailless. The terrain is brutal. Polished granite slabs slick with algae, waterfalls that drop without warning. Sections where climbers must rappel or risk fatal falls. Experienced mountaineers call it one of the most dangerous routes in Yosemite. The Park Service calls it something else. Prohibited. But it's not the terrain that keeps rangers away. It's what happens to people who go down there. The canyon has claimed at least 15 lives since the 1970s. Falls, drownings, hypothermia. Those are the official causes. But talk to the search and rescue teams who've pulled bodies out of Tenaya Canyon, and they'll tell you something doesn't add up. In 1981, a solo hiker named Michael Harlan entered the canyon despite warnings from rangers. He was experienced, well-equipped, and left detailed route plans with friends. 3 days later, his body was found at the base of a waterfall. The medical examiner ruled accidental drowning, but the autopsy revealed something strange. His lungs contained almost no water. He drowned somehow, without inhaling water. A decade later, in 1993, 2 rock climbers descended into the canyon to attempt a route they'd scouted from above. Both were highly skilled, with years of technical experience. They radioed their base camp regularly throughout the first day. On the second day, the radio transmissions stopped. Search teams found them 3 days later, sitting upright against a boulder. No visible injuries, no signs of struggle. Both were dead. Cause of death: cardiac arrest. Simultaneous cardiac arrest in 2 healthy men in their 30s with no prior heart conditions. Then there are the reports from those who survived Tenaya Canyon. They describe experiences that don't belong in any wilderness environment. In 2004, a guided group of advanced hikers received a special permit to descend the canyon. Their guide, a man with 20 years of Yosemite backcountry experience, led them carefully through the technical sections. Everything went smoothly until they reached a section known as the Inner Gorge, where the canyon narrows and the walls rise 500 feet on either side. That's when they heard it. A sound one hiker later described as a voice that came from the rock itself. Not echoing, not distant. It sounded like someone speaking directly into their ears. Words they couldn't understand, but felt they should recognize. The guide stopped the group immediately and ordered them to turn back. He later told park officials he'd heard that sound before, years earlier on a solo descent. He never went back into the canyon after that. Since 2010, the National Park Service has actively discouraged entry into Tenaya Canyon. The official reason: extreme hazard. The real reason, according to one ranger who spoke anonymously: too many people come out different. Different how? He described hikers who descended into the canyon and returned unable to recall entire sections of the route, hours missing from their memory. Others reported vivid hallucinations, sightings of figures moving along the canyon walls, shadows that followed them through the gorge. One woman swore she saw her own reflection in a pool of water, but the reflection was looking back at her with eyes that weren't hers. And there's this: every single GPS unit taken into the Inner Gorge malfunctions. Not battery failure, not signal loss. The devices show locations that don't exist, coordinates that place hikers miles away from where they actually are, altitude readings that fluctuate by thousands of feet in seconds. In 2016, a research team from UC Berkeley applied for a permit to study the canyon's unique geology. Denied. They applied again with additional safety protocols. Denied. When they asked why, the Park Service cited ongoing monitoring of the area. Monitoring of what, exactly, remains classified. Today, Tenaya Canyon is marked on maps with a single notation: unmaintained route. Travel not recommended. But ask any ranger who's worked in Yosemite for more than 5 years, and they'll tell you the truth. It's not a recommendation. It's a warning, not about the terrain, about what happens to people who go down there and what some of them bring back. Because when a place claims lives in ways that medical examiners can't explain, when experienced guides refuse to return, when the Park Service buries permit requests under vague bureaucratic language, it stops being about danger. It becomes about something else. Something the canyon holds. Something that doesn't let go. On the northern edge of Yosemite, near the park's boundary with Stanislaus National Forest, there's an area marked on some old maps as Rancheria Mountain. Modern park maps don't label it. Trail guides don't mention it. If you ask rangers about it, most will claim they don't know the area. But a few, the ones who've been there long enough, will tell you the same thing. Stay away from the mountain. Not because of terrain, not because of wildlife, because of what happens at night. In 1979, the Park Service installed a fire lookout station near the summit of Rancheria Mountain. It was a standard structure, designed for seasonal staffing during fire season. The first ranger assigned there lasted 3 weeks. He requested an immediate transfer and refused to explain why. The second ranger lasted 5 days. She filed a report describing auditory disturbances inconsistent with natural wildlife. The report was archived and never made public. The third ranger never filed anything. He abandoned the lookout in the middle of the night and hiked 12 miles back to park headquarters in complete darkness. When questioned, he said only, "There are too many voices." The lookout was decommissioned in 1980. The structure was dismantled and removed, but the voices didn't stop. Backpackers camping near Rancheria Mountain report the same phenomenon. After dark, usually around 2 or 3 a.m., they hear conversations, clear, distinct voices speaking just outside their tents. The voices sound human. They sound close. When campers investigate, there's no one there. One group in 2006 recorded audio throughout the night. The recording captured over 40 minutes of distinct speech. But here's the problem. The words aren't in any recognizable language. Linguists who analyzed the audio later described it as structured but unidentifiable. It had rhythm, cadence, inflection, all the markers of human communication. But no linguistic patterns matched any known language, living or dead. In 2010, a wildlife biologist spent a week conducting nocturnal surveys near Rancheria Mountain. His goal was to document owl populations. What he documented instead was far stranger. On the fourth night, his audio equipment picked up vocalizations that didn't match any species in the North American fauna database. Low, resonant tones that oscillated in patterns. He described them as almost conversational, as if something was answering itself. When he submitted his findings to the Park Service, he was told his equipment likely malfunctioned. But his recordings were confiscated, and his research permit was not renewed. Since then, the Park Service has quietly restricted overnight camping within a 2-mile radius of Rancheria Mountain. The official reason: habitat protection for endangered species, but no endangered species are listed for that area. No conservation programs operate there, and rangers avoid the mountain entirely after sunset. There's something else too. Hikers who've been near Rancheria Mountain at night describe a persistent feeling of being watched, not the natural awareness of wildlife. This is different. A sensation of eyes on you, plural, from multiple directions. Some report seeing lights moving through the trees, not flashlights, too low to the ground, weaving between trunks in synchronized patterns. And then there are the missing time reports. Multiple campers have described setting up camp before dusk and then waking up hours later with no memory of falling asleep. Their watches show time passed, but they have no recollection. Campfires burned down to embers, they don't remember lighting. Food consumed, they don't remember eating. One man found his tent packed, his gear organized, and his boots tied, all while he has zero memory of preparing to leave. The Park Service won't talk about Rancheria Mountain. Freedom of Information requests return heavily redacted documents. The few lines that remain visible mention acoustic monitoring equipment and ongoing investigation, but no results are ever published. No findings are shared, and the voices keep happening. Every few months someone camps too close. They hear the conversations. They record them, and then their recordings vanish. Their permits are revoked, and they're quietly told not to return. So what's on Rancheria Mountain? What speaks at night in a language no one recognizes? And why is the Park Service so determined to keep people away? Some mysteries don't need answers. They just need witnesses to stay silent. In the southeastern section of Yosemite, near the Wawona area, there's a meadow the Park Service doesn't acknowledge. It's not on any map. Rangers don't patrol there. Hikers who find it usually do so by accident, and very few talk about it afterward. It's known, among those who know, as the Mirror Meadow. Not because of water. Because of what you see when you look too long. The first documented account comes from a ranger in 1987. He was tracking an injured deer through dense forest when he emerged into a clearing roughly 150 meters across. The meadow was ringed by old-growth pines, their trunks scarred and twisted in unnatural patterns, The grass in the center was perfectly flat, as if pressed down by weight that had just lifted it. He radioed his location. Dispatch couldn't verify it. His coordinates didn't match any meadow in the database. They told him to return to the main trail. But he stayed a few more minutes, and that's when he saw it. His reflection. Not in water. In the air itself, about 3 feet above the ground. A shimmering, translucent version of himself standing motionless in the center of the meadow. He moved. It didn't. He stepped forward. It remained still, watching him with eyes that didn't blink. He left immediately. He filed a report that night. The report was removed from the system within 48 hours. He never spoke about it again. Not officially, but he told a few close colleagues the same thing. I saw something looking back at me, and it wasn't me anymore. Since then, at least a dozen people have reported similar experiences in the southeastern wilderness. All describe finding a meadow that doesn't exist on maps. All describe seeing reflections that behave wrong. Some see themselves. Others see figures they don't recognize. One hiker described seeing a man in outdated ranger uniform standing in the meadow's center, perfectly still, staring directly at her. When she checked the meadow later from a different angle, the figure was still there, still facing her exact position. In 2003, a photography enthusiast captured digital images of the meadow. When he reviewed them at home, every photo showed the same anomaly. A faint, translucent human shape standing in the center, visible only in the digital files, invisible to the naked eye at the time. He submitted the images to the Park Service. They were dismissed as lens flare. But lens flare doesn't cast shadows. And in his photos, the translucent figure cast a shadow across the grass. The Park Service won't confirm the meadow exists. Freedom of Information requests return no documents. GPS coordinates submitted by hikers are labeled as erroneous. And yet, people keep finding it, not by searching, by wandering off trail, by taking a wrong turn, by following a deer path that shouldn't lead anywhere. And everyone who finds it describes the same unease. The feeling that the meadow is a threshold, that the reflections aren't images, they're something else, something aware. One backpacker spent an hour in the meadow in 2015, documenting everything he saw. He wrote detailed notes, took measurements, recorded video. When he tried to leave, he realized he couldn't find the trail he'd entered from. Every direction looked identical. He walked in what he thought was a straight line for 30 minutes, and ended up back at the meadow's center. It took him 3 hours to finally escape, and when he checked his GPS later, it showed he'd walked 9 miles in circles within a 150-meter radius. He never went back, but he said something that others have echoed. The reflections don't just show you, they show what you could become, and that's what's terrifying. The Park Service has never explained why the meadow doesn't appear on maps. They've never addressed the reports. They've never sent teams to investigate, at least not officially. But rangers know officially. They know there are places in Yosemite where reality bends, where the boundaries between what is and what should be grow thin. And they know the Mirror Meadow is one of those places. So if you're hiking in the southeastern wilderness, and you find a meadow that feels too still, too quiet, too perfect, don't stay. Don't look too long into the air above the grass. Because if you see your reflection staring back, it might not be a reflection at all. It might be something waiting on the other side, trying to figure out how to cross over. And the longer you watch, the easier you make it. At the far northeastern edge of Yosemite, near the border with the Hoover Wilderness, there's a valley park rangers called the Dead Zone. Not officially. Not on any maps or public documents. But if you ask a ranger who's worked the high country for more than a decade, they'll know exactly what you mean. It's a place where things stop. Completely. The valley is small, maybe 400 meters long, and 200 meters wide, nestled between granite ridges at an elevation of roughly 9,800 feet. It should be teeming with life. Mountain meadows at that altitude support marmots, pikas, migratory birds, occasional black bears. But in the dead zone, there's nothing. No insects, no birds, no animal tracks. Not even lichen on the rocks. In 1995, a biologist conducting a wildlife survey for the National Park Service hiked into the valley as part of a broader study on high-altitude ecosystems. His task was to document biodiversity. He documented the opposite. In 3 days of observation, he recorded 0 animal sightings, 0 insect activity, 0 bird calls. His audio equipment picked up nothing but wind and his own footsteps. But here's what disturbed him most. His plants didn't grow right. He collected soil samples. The soil was rich, well-drained, ideal for alpine vegetation. But the plants growing there were stunted, pale, and twisted into shapes that didn't match normal growth patterns. One wildflower species, typically 8 to 10 inches tall, measured barely 3 inches and had stems that spiraled at sharp angles, as if growing away from something in the soil. He sent the samples to a university lab. The results came back showing elevated levels of electromagnetic radiation in the soil. Not dangerously high, but far above normal for a mountain valley with no known geological anomalies. The source couldn't be identified. Then his equipment started failing. Cameras that worked perfectly the day before wouldn't power on. Batteries that were fully charged drained in minutes. His GPS unit displayed coordinates that placed him 50 miles south of his actual location. His satellite phone couldn't establish a signal despite clear skies. On his final day in the valley, he woke to find his tent partially collapsed. Not from wind. There was no wind. The support poles had bent inward, as if something outside had pressed against the fabric with enormous force while he slept. But there were no footprints, no disturbance in the dirt, no sign that anything had been there. He left immediately. He filed a report recommending the area be studied further. The Park Service never followed up. His research permit for the following year was denied without explanation. Since then, the dead zone has remained off limits. Not officially restricted, but rangers don't patrol there, trails don't lead there, and park maps label the area generically as wilderness, without specific features. Hikers who stumble into it usually don't stay long. They describe an overwhelming sense of wrongness, a pressure in the air that makes it hard to breathe, a silence so absolute it feels like the world has stopped, and the sense that something is watching, not from the trees or the ridges, but from below, from the ground itself. In 2008, 2 backpackers camped at the edge of the dead zone without realizing where they were. They set up their tent just outside the valley's boundary. Around midnight, they woke to a sound they couldn't identify. A deep, rhythmic vibration, like a massive engine running underground. The ground beneath their tent pulsed faintly. They packed their gear and hiked out in complete darkness, too unnerved to stay until morning. When they reported it to rangers, they were told it was likely seismic activity. But there were no earthquakes recorded that night, no geological surveys conducted in the area, and the vibrations they described didn't match any known natural phenomenon. Here's what makes the dead zone different from other restricted areas. It's not dangerous in the traditional sense. No cliffs, no predators, no extreme weather. People who go there don't get hurt. They don't disappear. They just leave feeling like they've been somewhere they shouldn't have been. Somewhere that wasn't meant for them. And the silence. Everyone who's been there talks about the silence. It's not peaceful. It's oppressive. The kind of silence that makes you aware of your heartbeat, your breathing, the sound of your own thought. The kind that makes you feel like you're intruding on something that was there long before you, and will be there long after, and wants very much to be left alone. The Park Service doesn't talk about the dead zone. They don't confirm it exists, but they also don't send research teams there anymore. They don't issue permits for that area. And rangers, when asked off the record, will tell you the same thing. Some places in Yosemite don't want us, and the dead zone is one of them. So if you're hiking the northeastern high country and you come across a valley where the air feels too still, where your equipment stops working, where the silence is so complete you can hear your blood moving through your veins, turn around. Don't camp. Don't investigate. Don't try to explain it. Because some places aren't empty. They're just waiting for the right moment to show you what's really there. And by then, it's too late to leave. 6 restricted areas hidden beneath Yosemite's beauty. 6 places where rangers stop, maps end, and reality bends. The Merced Grove, where hikers vanished and trees remember. Site 17, where silence is measured and sound refuses to echo. Tenaya Canyon, where bodies are found with impossible causes of death. Rancheria Mountain, where voices speak in languages that don't exist. The Meadow, where reflections watch with eyes that aren't yours. The Dead Zone, where life itself stops and the ground hums with something far below. Maybe these places were always like this. Maybe Yosemite's beauty is a mask for something older. Something that doesn't care about trails, or permits, or people who wander too far. Maybe the Park Service knows exactly what's in these zones, and that's why they're closed. Not to protect the land, to protect us from what the land is hiding. If you made it this far, thank you made it this far. Thank you. Leave a like if one of these places stayed with you. Tell us which zone unsettled you most, and which one we should investigate next. But remember, some trails don't end because they're unfinished. They end because what lies beyond them doesn't want to be found. And when you find it anyway, you become part of the reason they built the fences in the first place.